So he's 10 years younger than me, so he's around 45-ish. Yeah. Bachelor of Theology. And that's yeah. Pentecostal College in Saskatoon. So he was, yeah. No, he's in Alberta.
It's like me personally.
Yeah.
Okay, I just gotta, just give me a minute here. I'm not nervous, but I'm just anxious to get going, so I guess when you get... Okay, and remember, yeah, but then I'll add, and remember the trade show is on the lower level also.
Yes.
And the other one.
Yeah, that just, is this her?
We've got a little bit of flexibility with that. Also,
This one.
yes. Really appreciate it.
Lindsay Whitfield from Martinsville. What is confusing to me is this person that does electrician, and it's a journeyman.
Is it a silent P on your name? Shibile. Yeah, like that, that's what I was going to say.
I always tell people if I say, but she sells
Yeah. I could just get my notes here. And,
Perfect. I actually have a commercial to play, so
yeah, you have 5 minutes. So.
yeah, I won't even be taking probably all of that.
No, but that's okay.
I
Okay.
have a little speech.
I was going to say.
All your housekeeping notes.
Yeah, this session is sponsored by the Village of Stonebridge, the Village at Stonebridge, and we have Tammy Shabailo, Vice President of Business Development, here on behalf of the vendors and speakers. Please show your, so then you can make your own rules when you get here.
Good. I'm good at that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take my cards and put them at the back of the room. Just didn't know where to put them. Okay. Yeah. Please.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, it's 12:30. Could you please take a seat and we'll get started? We have a jam-packed day and we got to get everything going. So if you'd please bear with me for a little bit, I have a whole bunch of stuff that I have to read. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The City of Humboldt Experience. I'm Glenn George, SUMA Northeast Director and a City Councilor in Melfort. Before we get this session, I want to quickly go over some safety information which can be found on page 25 of your Convention 2019 Handbook. We want to make sure our delegates are safe, so when you have a minute, please familiarize yourself with that information. And expect to be reminded of this a few times during the convention. Your safety is very important to us. Please note that this session is being audio and video recorded. That means that if you want to ask a question, we need you to go to the mic, identify yourself and your municipality, and speak clearly into it when asking your question. Using the mic means everyone in the room can hear you, including our speakers. And the question is on the recording later on the recording. Then there's a period, so that means I have to stop, right? Using the mic means, Later this month, the session will be available on the SUMA YouTube channel, and we want those recordings to be a good resource for everybody. When we plan events for our members, we try to tailor the topics and speakers to your needs. The full bios of our speakers today are in the SUMA Convention app, available for free download in your device's app store. And it is a tremendous app. I put it on my phone and wow, it does everything except change your socks. Please give our speakers your full attention and be open to how their information can apply to your municipality. Some lessons are going to be easier than others to apply, but I'm sure everyone in the room can use this valuable information when you go back to your town or village or city. This session is sponsored by the Village at Stonebridge, and we have Tammy Shabilo, the Vice President of Business Development, here on behalf to introduce our speakers. Please now show your thanks for their sponsor of this session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's our privilege to be at SUMA and to represent the topic of senior housing throughout the province of Saskatchewan. Luther Care Communities has 7 communities throughout Saskatchewan. We also have 15 special care need homes for 18 and over challenged and disability individuals in our care. We also do home health care for those that are aging in place, which is a strong component of what's happening throughout the province right now for us. Most important on that topic is the lessons we learned through those endeavors brought us to our newest project, which we opened 2 years ago, the Village at Stonebridge. And many people see the Village at Stonebridge as opulent or as beautiful or as not what you're used to in senior care and in senior retirement living. I want you to open your mind and think about the generation of people in the province who've been able to work very hard and who've afforded themselves the ability to get away in the warm months so that they're not shut in the winter out in the outlying areas of the cities. Certainly Saskatoon and Regina have always had nice representation of senior housing options. What we found in our communities was a whole generation of people that were actually putting themselves at risk by aging in place because they weren't going there yet and they weren't ready for that. And so there's a preconception of what senior housing and senior retirement living is in Saskatchewan. So the Village at Stonebridge is a brainchild of offering an amenity for people who still have a very strong appetite as they enter into their retirement and into the age where they need care for quality in food, quality in choices, doing what they want, when they want it, and when they need it. They're not interested in a program that's published to them that this is when you will eat, this is when you will play, this is when your community is alive and when it's not. So this does represent what I like to refer to as the cruise ship on land. It does represent for people who now have the means to sit and enjoy life in a community of having many options. So thank you for letting me share with you a new concept that we have developed through our lessons over 60 years. We also this year are downstairs in the trade show, so much more information about the variety of communities is available to you. So I don't have any collateral with me here. I invite you to see us. We're in suite, our booth 132 downstairs. So thank you for attending this. I think it's going to be a wonderful session. I'm looking forward to learning about your experiences, and thank you again.
Is it my turn, Glenn?
No, we've got a commercial here.
Okay.
What's your appetite for living? If you are looking for innovative retirement living, the Village at Stonebridge is designed for a new generation of retirees. A variety of suites, plus choices for dining that are exceptional and unique. The Village Bistro offers amazing, chef-prepared meals for residents, their family, and guests. Or choose 3-course dinner service, a la carte menu, or in-suite room services. Discover your appetite for living. The Village at Stonebridge. Independent, innovative, and unique.
Now it's my turn.
It's your turn.
After 35 years in television, I should know you have to wait until after the commercial's over. Welcome to Saskatoon, everyone. I'm Bob Maloney, the Mayor of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and of course Saskatoon being the banana belt of Saskatchewan. When I left home today, it was minus 28 degrees in Yorkton. As I got closer to Saskatoon, it got warmer and warmer. It was minus 24 by the time I got here. So welcome to the banana belt of the province of Saskatchewan. I think we're going to have a really good session for you today. It's a session the Mayor of Humboldt and I have done before at another SUMA event. It was so popular they asked us back. We're still not getting a per diem though, are we? Nope. I don't think so. But anyway, I'd like to thank everybody. We've got a really good topic for you today. I'd like to introduce Joe Day, the city manager from the City of Humboldt, and Mayor Rob Muench of the City of Humboldt joining us today. Let's have a round of applause for these two gentlemen. To say they've had a difficult year, I think, would be understating it. Everyone is familiar with what has happened at Humboldt. I don't think we're going to dwell a whole lot on the incident itself. We're going to go over some of the things that happened as a result of the tragic accident on the highway and go through how they responded to it, which I think for all of us today working in whether it's villages, towns, or cities, I think there's something we can all learn from their experience today. So I think, Mayor Rob, I'm going to start with you, I guess, you wanted to start with a thank you, and I think that's very appropriate.
Yeah. So the incident, when it happened, saw a tremendous response at the scene. And I'd like to just say thanks to a number of the people that responded to the tragedy that night. The communities of Nipawin and Tisdale and Melfort, and their surrounding communities. Zenon Park would be one that comes to mind, and the region around there. We had tremendous response from them and from the hospitals in those communities, as well as the staff, the doctors that came from Melfort to the scene, to Nipawin and Tisdale, to the hospitals there, and just the communities at large there, first responders, and all the people that helped that night. And then that goes out from that, to STARS, to the air ambulance people, to the RUH in Saskatoon, who did tremendous work that night and in the months following, and it goes on from there. The province, a number of municipalities that helped us out over the next number of months as well. I want to just say, as Mayor of Humboldt, thank you. Thank you for the support that came to our community from across the province and around the country. Many of the communities that you represent here today contributed to that help that was sent our way. So I would just like to start with that, because that's something that I try to do whenever I can, just to say thank you for all the help that we did get from everybody. So thank you.
Joe, I wanted to come to you about first responders. You've been to a number of places, you've spoken a number of events about the first responders, and I think it's important for everybody to think about the people that are first on the scene. I don't think they get enough credit.
No, absolutely not. And I think that, again, we don't know, in Humboldt, as many of you know, the accident scene was 170 kilometers away. So our own first responders in our community were not on the scene. But you know what we have learned, what I've learned a lot over the whole months since it all happened, is the importance of mental health and the proper attention to mental health and how it affects everybody differently. So you know what, we can't say enough about the first responders that were there, that did their job and did all that stuff there. But really, even in our community, we relied on what we would call our first responders to help us through that weekend, which was a totally different environment. It was an event of media and all kinds of attention. But they too, same thing. You rely on those same people, those people that you can go to help you out a whole lot.
Well, certainly, in the post-traumatic stress of an incident like that is really unprecedented in Saskatchewan. We haven't really seen this for many years, since another tragic bus accident involving a hockey team years ago. So it doesn't happen often, but the stress later is difficult for everyone to deal with.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And again, Bob, as you know, we can only hope that Melfort, Nipawin, and those areas where their first responders responded, are getting the assistance they need. And I've certainly tried to convey to those communities that if we as Humboldt that have the focus of attention on us, and everybody seems to think this was exclusively Humboldt that's affected, let Rob or I know, so that if your first responders in those communities need help, leverage our what we can do to get that assistance up there for sure.
Certainly. And starting at the beginning, Rob, this is a phone call no mayor wants to get. Your phone rang on the evening and started a series of events. It really hasn't ended even to this day. The phone is still ringing with media inquiries about appearing at SUMA, and I've heard media wants to talk to you when we're finished our session today. So it still really hasn't gone away.
Just back to that April 6th supper time, sitting down with my wife to a meal, and we were getting ready because the hockey game was on, and we were going to listen to it on the radio. So I think it was around between 6 and 6:30 when I got a call from the city manager, Joe. We had heard something in the media and on Facebook that there was an issue with the game being canceled, and really didn't know a whole lot after that. But so I got a call from the city manager saying that the leisure services director was at his house, and that he had heard through his channels that there had been an accident with the bus, and he didn't have a lot of detail. we stay in touch and see how things went. So, and then it was pretty much, okay, we don't know anything else, so hung up the phone and waited for more information to come in. And I don't know, maybe 10 minutes later, my house phone rang this time. And it was Mayor Harper from Nipawin phoning, and she had been in touch with our first responders at the scene, and her first words out of her mouth were, "It's bad. Have you heard about the accident?" I said, "Yes." She said, "It's bad. There's been fatalities. Our people are on the ground there," and she had heard some numbers of deaths and that type of thing. So it was, it's sort of, then it really sunk in. At first I was thinking it was, and I think every hockey team has had experiences on the bus where you hit the ditch and, you hear of players pushing the bus out or a tow truck coming or whatever. But that's, in my mind, first what I thought what was the situation. So after that call from Mayor Harper, I knew that things were not good. So after I got off the phone with her, I told her to keep me in touch if anything else she had information-wise. I got off the phone, phoned Joe back and said what I had heard, and so we then started talking, what are we going to do? So we decided to call some of our senior management people and head down to City Hall. And we met there right in the front office there, and people started coming. We had the fire chief show up, some people from our local counseling group partners who played a tremendous role in the next couple of days following. And we basically decided to go down to the hockey rink, down to the Uniplex, where it's a center. I don't know if people have been to Humboldt or not, but that's the hub of our community. We've got the rink, we've got the aquatic center, the curling rink, the high school is attached, our convention center is there. So that was the logical place to go as a community, and we did. And when I got there, there was already people there that just came on their own. It was quite amazing that everybody just gravitated there because that's where they went. Yeah.
The importance of a plan, Joe. Emergency measures is something we all have a plan, but it's kind of like getting into a boxing ring. You don't know you're in a fight until you get punched. And I mean, we all have a plan, but how important was it to bring the group together and have that kind of support?
Well, certainly it was just very apparent that we needed to get everybody, some of my senior managers together and the mayor and RCMP, just to try and disseminate what was really going on and try to understand what to do next. And albeit, there's a lot of communities that do the plans, and if you're really good at it, you know what to do when a train derails in your community, you know what to do when a truck accident occurs on your main artery, you know how to handle a lot of those things. What none of us would have imagined or thought of is what happens when an event takes place 170 kilometers away, but it's going to bring all kinds of worldwide attention to your community and grief and outpouring of support and that sort of thing, because it was really something that none of us could have imagined how to do or how to manage through. But I will say that, the fact that the mayor and I had a good team working around us and supporting us, and I'll be quite honest, everybody checked their egos at the door and came in understanding that we were determining what to do next on the fly, and everybody in the room supported us, and of course all the peers across the province were calling and emailing their support as well. So we knew we had people we could rely on as well, but it was just, there is no plan that you could have created to help us along, really.
And that's where we were talking before. So we did a rehearsal. It was 5 minutes, but it was a rehearsal nonetheless. But the importance of networking and events like this one, getting together at SUMA, you know who your peers are, you know who you need to talk to. Was that a factor for you? Oh,
absolutely. I had only been the city manager there for about 6 months at the time that this occurred. And so there was, even getting accustomed to even some of my senior managers. I didn't know all of their capabilities and that sort of thing. But what it was is that through the networks that I had created and they had created, across Saskatchewan. There was all types of support, whether it be the City of Saskatoon, city manager, sending an email, or Yorkton, and everybody. And the benefit of the peer networking that you do at an event like this is that you get to know who those faces are and what their capabilities are. And the lesson that we learned is don't be shy to accept that help, because we knew that our community was such a small managerial center. I mean, we really only had, in the City of Humboldt, we only really have, a handful of managers, and our expertise is somewhat limited, especially when it comes to worldwide media coming into our community. We absolutely leaned on the assistance of the other cities and communities that offered it. Absolutely.
The outpouring of support, unprecedented, like about 10,000 other people. I left a message on Rob's phone. I told him, don't call me back. Just if you need something, call us. I knew how busy he was going to be. Can you touch on the breadth and scope of this, Rob? Because I don't think many people understand the outreach was global.
It was, and that night, and maybe we can touch on that later, but that night, as we assembled in what we call Jubilee Hall, which is the main hall in our convention center, seats probably 300 to 400 people, I would imagine, and it was full of people. We stayed there till I think I got left at 3:30 in the morning or something, because it was starting to clear out. And but I went home trying to think maybe I could get an hour of sleep or two, and I think we had rescheduled another meeting at 7:30 in the morning with our core group that we put together, just to kind of manage the situation. So I went home. I think I was sleeping. I don't even know if I fell asleep, but my phone rang at I think it was 4 in the morning, and it was my cell phone, and I'm like, how did somebody? It was I didn't recognize the area code on there, so I answered it, and it was the BBC in London already, asking if, because it was midday there, they wanted me to go live on one of their shows there, and so then that is when it hit, how the broadness of the story going out would become. So I agreed to do in 10 minutes. I was talking to their producer, in 10 minutes they were going to put me on live, and so my wife woke up, and we went downstairs into the kitchen, and so then the phone rings. I'm doing the interview, or just before it rang, she looks at me and she said, and this will kind of stick with me for a while, she goes, "It's the BBC, you better put on your pants," she goes. Even though they can't see you, you should put on your pants. So I tell that story because it's got a little bit of humor in it, and I've tried to use that over the period of the last number of months to it helps everybody get through this. So did the interview, and then going down into the back to the rink in the morning at 7:30, and the place was there was media flown in overnight from I think every network in the U.S. All the major networks were there with, and they weren't just there with a reporter, and they had the full crew with 3 or 4 or 5 people.
Satellite trucks were lined up.
Satellite trucks were out, and it was just. It was like, what's going on here? So,
well, it does get overwhelming, particularly when when you're a mayor from small cities in Saskatchewan. Yeah. We're not used to this kind of media attention, and if there's anything you could tell our audience today about dealing with this, it really is unprecedented.
Well, in the media, that was and I learned the term, and we talked about it a lot. Was media wrangling. We brought back, Joe phoned our former communications person from the city and our current communications person, and we involved, with some of our staff and Joe personally, just to try to corral the media, because when they got there, they basically, it was a public building, right? So they just set up wherever they wanted, and it was, at the beginning, very uncontrolled and hard to, especially when you had families there and they're in shock yet, and so it was difficult that way, and just the whole You talked about the cell phone thing, and, you know, my voicemail was full, and my email was, you know, I couldn't even try to answer a lot of the requests and the offers of help. But sifting through a few of them, and they were from other cities in the province and stuff, and offering help, and we certainly did take them up on that. I know sometimes that's sort of a hollow gesture to say, if you need anything, just let me know. But it was something that we did call upon, and it was definitely offered.
So you people are lucky you came to this session, because he'll lose his voice totally by the session this afternoon. But when you start getting these inquiries, getting information is a real difficult part of this. Having worked in the media, I know it's difficult to get information from the scene, but having good information and accurate information to report to the media was difficult, and it must have been even more so in this condition, Rob.
It was definitely, yeah. One thing too, we found out that was possibly a mistake, or I don't know exactly, but, and we all do this when we go to a meeting, pass around a sheet, and everybody puts their phone number and their email address on the sheet, and we had it all typed up really nice, and unfortunately, I don't know how it happened, but somebody left a copy of that in the public area of the arena where all the media was. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of the phone numbers were copied down, and so that's how people got
That's the city manager's fault.
Yeah, I was going to say, he keeps looking over at me. I know how it happened, yeah.
For all the mayors here, that's the default setting. Call the city manager.
Yeah, no, it was, and it was one of those things where you don't really think about that, but
Absolutely. I'm going to just expand on that,
Certainly,
Bob, a little bit, because that was one of the lessons learned that, you know, we've been working with a division out of the province of emergency management to kind of do an after-action report. What did we learn? What did we observe and stuff like that? It's not complete yet, but one of that issue came up as to what really occurred. But as Rob said, you know, we document everybody's name and email and phone number, and it's listed and typed up and to be circulated amongst those people that are in our, and we'll call it an Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is really kind of how we operated it. And it was meant to be circulated there, but we also had a front registration counter where people were coming in, like people from the public were coming in, and we weren't always sure whether there were families or just supporters or other people from government agencies there to help us. So we actually we had some of our volunteer firemen that were manning that front table, that front counter. So we said, okay, well, they need a sheet, because if they need to know who's leading our security team, or who's leading the facilities team, or who's leading the communications team, they need to know who to contact. But yeah, there was some misunderstanding as to what the purpose of that sheet was, and yeah, they certainly just had it out laying on the volunteer firefighters. They did their best, but it wasn't anything that they could control too much. But yeah, so what ended up happening is, yeah, all the cell numbers for the mayor and the president of the Broncos and our mental health services, all of that kind of what was supposed to be confidential contact information got out fairly quick to the media. And of course that became, you know, you think it's bad enough when they don't know your phone numbers and they're chasing you down. I couldn't even imagine how the calls to Rob went. Apparently the city manager wasn't that important. I didn't get too many calls out of it myself.
Oh, so your number wasn't on that?
I don't think
it
was. Yeah, I think it was off.
I don't think that was a mistake. Let's talk a little bit about managing, especially your staff, Joe. As everybody will understand, mayors don't run cities. City managers run the cities, and your staff in dealing with this had to be difficult for your staff, and you did get help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we brought together, and we'll call it the EOC, there's a couple things that we, you know, did that a lot of your training that if you go through emergency training, emergency operations training, there's a lot of things they'll tell you to do that we did a little differently. And some of them worked out, I think, and some of them, again, like this contact list, didn't work out for us. But one of the things that we did was we quickly established who were some of the key players or leaders in some of the different areas. For management of kind of crowd control and personnel and security, we put our fire chief in charge of that. Our facility, we knew there was going to be a lot of requirements for audio visual and seating and covering the ice. You know, our facilities director was put in charge of that. We had RCMP, but mostly they were just a liaison as to what was really going on at the crash scene, because as Rob mentioned, there was a lot of information we didn't have, and we were, you know, making things up as we went along because we really didn't have a lot of accurate information. But what was more important than just the, say, 7 or 8 different team leaders that were basically some of my senior managers, they had their networks. And so the fire chief, you know, right away he's contacting Sask Emergency, the Department of Emergency Services in Saskatchewan, and rallying, okay, what kind of radios do we need? What kind of vests do we need for crowd control? Our facilities director called in some former employees that were familiar with setting up some stuff in the facility and stuff like that. So there was help coming from all over, but again, mostly from those networks of my directors and managers. And you know what, there's still things I'm learning today as to who was contacted and who lent some support that I didn't know about. And I mean, I think that's a good thing when you can rely on your directors and your managers to get the job done, and you don't have to worry about them needing to come back to you to clear everything or get everything approved. I knew that I could trust them, and they just carried out their different roles, so it worked out really well.
Many of these things don't fall into our wheelhouse, as it were, either. I mean, I look at the memorial that was held at the Edgar Peterson. I thought it was unbelievable. It was telecast pretty much globally, as far as I understand. And I mean, that was an unbelievable event, and that certainly isn't in my wheelhouse. You had to have people helping with all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and again, I don't know if it was through the mayor, I think, that actually first mentioned it to us at the EOC, was that the local ministerial group was figuring that they should put on a vigil of some type, and they were going to put it at the largest church in Humboldt, the St. Augustine Church. And I don't think it was even within half an hour after hearing that, we knew that that wasn't going to work. So we immediately contacted them and said, no, it's going to have to be at the arena. And even then, that's not going to be big enough. And we started to go beyond that. But I mean, I have to really, again, we have to give recognition where it's due. And that the ministerial group really set up what the itinerary for that agenda, what that event was going to look like. And so they did a great job of that. The facilities guys did a great job of covering the ice, getting the audio visual stuff set up, a lot of that. One of the odd things, or very fortunate things for us, again, we don't have anybody in our city that is necessarily a media wrangler expert. Somebody like yourself, Bob, would have been a great help to us to understand what the media is looking for and how to control them and corral them. But that was a big issue, and we were really beginning to worry about what was going to happen in the arena when we were going to do the vigil. And that's when a call came through to me, or that got forwarded up to me, and it was from Sportsnet. And Sportsnet was advising that one of their big 50-foot production trailers was going to be leaving after a Flames hockey game in Calgary, driving through the night, and they were going to be setting up in Humboldt on Sunday. And they were offering a pooled feed, and I'd never heard the term before. But as I learned more and it was explained to me, a pooled feed means one company, one production crew sets up, does all the camera work, and they allow every other network to plug into that. And so it minimizes the bickering and fighting over best locations and best camera spots. And I will say that the decision to actually go with the recommendation for a pooled feed, in this case by Sportsnet, I think really controlled the whole look of what that event was. And I think there was a lot of support that came from around the world because they saw an event, a vigil that looked really professional and looked really well. But again, it was more just by happenstance than anything that we ended up going that way, as opposed to what was the other direction we were going was, okay, how many cameras are we going to allow in the arena, and how are we going to control it all? So, you know, fortunately there was a couple media folks that I had grown to trust and rely on just in the 12 to 24 hours that I asked for their advice. I said, okay, this is being offered to me. Should I take it or not? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're going to annoy some of the others, the other companies, media outlets that wanted their own cameras there, but they said in the long run, it'll be the right decision.
Well, it turns a gong show into something more manageable.
Yeah.
And the end result was outstanding. But Rob, I have to say, on the political front, you're putting an event like this together, and by the way, the Premier's coming, and then by the way, the Prime Minister's going to be there. And so there's a lot of work that comes into that as well.
Yep, you forgot to mention Don Cherry.
Even bigger than the PM coming.
Yeah, it was, this started out as a community event to get together, to comfort the families who had all made their way to Humboldt, or most of them, if they weren't in Saskatoon at RUH. But so that's what it started out as, and then the snowball kept rolling and down the hill, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and you know, we're trying to rely on our community to you know, deal with all this, and throwing on top of the shock that everybody was still in was a little tough to kind of get through. But I think you know, I look at our community and how everybody came together, and I mentioned to people that this is the largest event. That vigil was the largest event that has ever taken place in our community. There was just under 6,000 people that attended that vigil that night. Our rink seats under 2,000. So they had another 500 or so on the floor, and then we have our curling rink next door that they put a live feed in there, and then we had our commons area at the high school next door. We had the gym at the high school. We had our convention center was full. All the halls there, I think, were utilized, and then the original church that we talked about was being the largest church in town was full as well. So, so between those venues, it was, and we did get a lot of help from you know, communities outside Humboldt that offered to send in some of their people to deal with just getting that many people into that event. You know, there was Warman and Martinsville and a number of other communities around there that offered help. They were one of those things where they said, what can we do to help? And we certainly did take them up on it, and we're very fortunate to have that happen, because they came in and you know, they said, we'll look after parking, or we'll do this and do that. And I tell the story that I ran home to change and came back. I had the best parking spot there, but when I went home and came back, I think I was parked 3 blocks away. But I said, I think we got to get a special mayor's parking spot at the rink from now on, I guess. I don't know. But
yeah, I'm still looking for one of those in Yorkton, by the way. I haven't got one either.
But yeah, it was you know, that event, just the way everything came together, and you put the largest event on, and I think it was 36 hours of prep time.
But to your credit, and I really do want to pat you in the back for this, when you get that much media involved, it becomes a circus, and it can be difficult, as you say, to wrangle those cats on a flatbed trailer. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that service still had a small town Saskatchewan feel, and I give you all credit in the world for that, because it didn't get away from you, and I think that was an important part.
It was every one of those people that night were from the community, pretty much, and it had that Saskatchewan thing, and not only that, but you look at the night of the 6th. You know, everybody came down to Jubilee Hall, and the place was full, and it was a lot of families and friends of the players that showed up there that night, and not only did they show up, but stacks of pizza from Boston Pizza, and the hotel Bella Vista Inn across the street brought food over, and there was Tim Hortons coffee and just everything. So somebody walked in with a case of Kleenex, and you know, I don't know where it came from, but it was one of the stores or something brought it down, because they knew that we'd be going through a lot of Kleenex.
They knew you'd need some.
Yeah, and it was just amazing, and that continued for the next number of days and weeks. You know, there was free hotel rooms for people that came to the community, and family members and that type of thing. So That's small town Saskatchewan. I tell you, you see it everywhere, and we all see it in our communities. This was just sort of magnified. I told people it was magnified, you know, exponentially, but you see that every day in Saskatchewan.
Now, from a city manager's point of view, and if there's any city managers in the audience, I apologize, but you guys tend to be control freaks. See a number of them. But you want to be in control. But in a situation like this, you have to delegate, because there's way more going on than anybody could hope to stay on top of. And I think that's a real credit to the volunteers, your staff. That delegation can occur and the job gets done, because it really is unmanageable.
Yeah, and you know, and again, you really do have to kind of, you know, categorize what needs to be done and then assign it to somebody, and then really you lay a lot of trust with them that they're going to, you know, get the work done. But we had, when I say we met as the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, on Friday night we met 4 times before we called it for the night. First meeting was shortly after 7 p.m. and last one was shortly after midnight, I believe.
Yeah, 12:30, I think.
I think was our last meeting that night. We had 3 more meetings on the Saturday, which again were, the first couple were a lot about, okay, the trauma response and making sure that people that were grieving were getting the attention, but then it really started to shift to the planning for the vigil. And so we had 3 on Saturday, 2 more on Sunday before, you know, some final preps for, you know, that whole event. And again, a lot of other things going on as well. And then finally 1 to kind of, you know, relax a little bit on Monday afterwards. But that's just, it kept everybody in the loop. And one of the things that I was saying, some things we did that in your training they'll tell you not to do. One of the things that we did was we allowed our elected officials and a few others into the same room as the EOC, where we had our leaders doing that. But it was, Rob was sitting right beside me at each meeting, and Rob was basically a real spokesperson on the communications and media, the dialogue and what message was going to the media. And that was really Rob's role in our EOC. And our councillors basically were one seat back from the table, just to observe and listen and to understand what's going on.
I can interrupt just for a second, because I know in communicating these things, it's so important to have one voice.
Yeah.
And was that the plan in this, is that you have one voice and one message?
Yeah, we certainly knew that the Broncos president and Mayor Rob here would be basically our spokespeople and our voices. And I mean, they did an excellent job, those two, to communicate out to all the media outlets that were asking for questions. And that absolutely, I can't say enough about how Rob and Kevin Geringer did a good job of being available for the interviews, because it was very apparent that the media were going to go to wherever they could to get a story. And so it was much better for it to be coming from Rob. Even if we didn't have a lot of information at the time, he was the right person to be communicating that at the very least. But yeah, so we had in our meetings, we actually had some of our city councillors, or it was open to all the city councillors, and a few of the other support staff from some of the other agencies there, basically as a second row of seats back behind, so they knew what was going on. We knew if they had any questions, they could ask us, but really it came down that they were great supporters for us. And again, when you have a community that is, Humboldt isn't that big, and our key managers, there isn't that large a number. We relied on our councillors to know what was going on, to help disseminate some of that information and assure anybody that was asking that, no, we had the EOC team had things under control. So.
And Rob, if I could, I mean, this is a great group to be talking about this with, but the importance of one voice, because when you don't have one voice, then you're answering questions about what somebody else said.
Yeah.
And so just the importance of that.
Yeah, and it was, being, I often say, when you sign up to be mayor of a small city in Saskatchewan, you don't expect to have to do that kind of stuff. Unless, of course, your moose gets bigger than or small, overtaken by a bigger moose in Norway or something. But so
where's Mayor Tolmie? Is Mayor Tolmie here? We wasted that. We'll get it in later.
I thanked him earlier this afternoon for taking some of the media attention off of Humboldt. So, you know, you don't sign up for that, and but yet you need to do what you need to do because you're representing your community, and you do the best that you can with what you have at the time. I didn't rely on a bunch of, you know, I just said what I needed, what I felt I should say. I didn't rely on somebody writing something for me. I felt in a situation like this that if you're talking from the heart, from what you feel, people will understand that. They'll I don't take it the way they'll take it the way you put it out, and I think it's important, you know, like I say, to represent your community and to try and do your best.
All right. Now, when we look at, I guess, the moving on part of this and moving forward, because it's difficult, because, you know, people think, oh, you know, you're trying to just forget something or brush something off. That's never the case. But there does come a point in time, especially as mayor, when your community really needs to take the next step.
Yeah, and we struggle with that because it is a fine line between what you're, and a good indication, this is sort of a thing that we talked about. We had green and gold ribbons put up on a lot of the trees and light standards throughout the community by a group of people that, and it was very well received by the community. And then, but, you know, towards, you know, months later, people started saying, well, this is a constant reminder every time I come back to Humboldt that we're having to see this in our everyday lives. And so we made the decision and talked to the people and said they had an agreement that after the home opener they were going to come down, and the next day they went around through the whole community and took down all the green ribbons. And that was a sign that, you know, the new team is on the ice. It's time to move forward as a community, as a team, as a group. And that's kind of that's sort of that starting point that we did. And there's still things that happen every day that go on and that bring things back. You know, we had the sentencing hearing and all that last week, and you know, that brings things back again. The families I know were involved in that, and it was not an easy thing, I don't think, for anybody.
But it was a Canada-wide response as well. I know you've got it. Do you want to show the group?
This is.
You brought a couple of things with you.
Yeah, this was in my mail on Thursday. It's like 8 different little booklets put together by 8 different schools in Newfoundland, and just with well wishes, and you know, so we're still getting this stuff from all over, and it's pretty heartwarming, you know, when you think about it. And I found the East Coast was overrepresented and stuff like that.
Well, the East Coast, for those of you who've traveled, the East Coast is just like home.
Yeah.
It really is.
I often hear the comparison to Saskatchewan, and you know, this is from Newfoundland, and you hear that comparison, and I think it's a lot of the same type of people, and yeah.
And Joe, there was a real charitable aspect of this as well. GoFundMe campaigns. I know many communities had fundraisers. I know Yorkton had a fundraiser where we had some excellent hockey players, some guys with some pro experience, some guys who were playing everywhere came home for that night. Mm-hmm. They put on a game, and I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $85,000, I think, that was raised at that hockey game. That was going, and so many communities did this. Really unprecedented, but I know from your point of view, also a bit of a nightmare.
Well, you know, and yes, now fortunately, I guess if I can put it that way in these terms, I mean, the GoFundMe program has such rules and parameters around it, and of course, most of the people in Saskatchewan will have followed that, yeah, the province has legislation that talks about group fundraising activities like that. So that all got managed mostly without much intervention from the city at all. And most of you will know that all that GoFundMe money has been dispersed amongst the families that were affected. So that's all been taken care of. But yeah, from the smaller side of it, and when the GoFundMe program wrapped up, there was still money that was coming in. With the Broncos' participation, there was immediately a community foundation set up, that community foundation fund. So there was a lot of the money that came in after that went to that fund. There's a committee that's been established to try and determine what the mandate and where the go forward is with that, and how to start determining where some of those funds go. And even just as recently as last week, we took a report through to council to establish a memorials committee, because we know that we want a number of different people to be represented in determining where in Humboldt and what kind of memorial will be established in the city of Humboldt, because we know that it's going to be on everybody's minds. Fortunately, some of our local parent contacts are very reasonable. They're not looking to be hurried along, or they're not trying to hurry it along or do anything. They are saying, let's take our time and do it right. But yeah, we established a committee, or council established a committee of, Bronco representation, like Bronco team representation, parent representation from the families that are affected by the losses, city council, and then our public arts committee, because we really felt a need that, if some sort of permanent memorial, again, if it's in a statue type of a forum or something like that, really needs some expertise on the public art side as well. So we put it together. They have yet to meet yet, but again, it's because we do want to take our time on that. And again, Bob, as you were saying, managing so much of the offers and the gifts and that sort of thing. I think at final count, I think there was something like 3,500 quilts that the city received to be disseminated to everybody that was affected, which is great. But again, now somebody's got to figure out how do we do this? How to distribute 3,500 quilts. And it's you think of there's all that great stuff, but it does take some management on our end. And, from the perspective of all the banners and gifts and little sculptures and crafts that have been done and contributed, it's where do we put them? Where do we store them? How do we do that? So, I mean, we took to council the recommendation that we use the upstairs floor of our gallery in Humboldt. It's not a huge space, but it's a nice space where we've got a sampling of all that stuff put up. And again, people can go there at their discretion if they want to see it and see some of the things that are coming in, such as these booklets or, the Governor General's recognition that she provided and that sort of thing, and some of the banners from the schools. It's a great place to go see that. But again, there's not near enough space there to distribute it or to display it all. So yep. We're archiving a lot of it. We're trying to catalog a lot of it, and we're trying to rotate through some of those displays. And we really haven't talked about what to do with it next, or when, how to change that process that we've got in place yep. right now. Right now it's working, and so we're just leaving it as is.
You're gonna go if it ain't broke.
Yeah, that's
there. Well, and we've rotated that through twice now, and I think they're probably looking at a third and possibly more.
Yep.
And Mayor Rob, I guess when it comes to a memorial, really like the decision you made to bring more people in, and for council kind of steps back. You bring in community people and
I myself am on that committee as well as another councillor. So by doing that, we do have council kind of involvement at the beginning to make sure that things are because the council is going to have to make the final decision on that. And and I certainly don't want to be sitting around a table trying to say that what you came up with maybe doesn't work, I guess.
It was a really good idea, but we don't like it.
Yeah, I think, and nobody wants to be put in that situation. Yep. So I think by doing it the way we have some council representation in that initial group with our public art committee, that they can hopefully come up with something that's going to fit for the whole community, and everyone will be on board at the end. So,
and if you don't mind, Bob, yep. In some jest, you say, it's a great idea, but we don't want to go ahead with it. But, in all honesty, there's the parents are receiving a lot of offers and ideas from people that celebrities and people with the money and the means to do some great, wonderful things. And, there is pressure on the parents to accept a gift from, say, a celebrity that wants to do a bronze of, a hockey team sort of thing, and it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of value, and they want to go ahead and do it. And thankfully, the parents thus far are understanding that no, that's not in the community's best interest, and really we need to work together on this. But it is, it is sometimes tough to tell people just slow down and let's make sure we do this right.
There's so many sensibilities, and you don't want to offend people.
That's right.
And that's always the difficulty in something like this. Every community has it, and somebody wants a memorial, and how long should this stay? At a street corner. We all run into this, but this is magnified 100 times over what we all deal with. But in, I guess, from other communities and support you've gotten, we wanted to take some time today to talk about the positives, because Mayor Rob said we had to. So we'll start with Mayor Rob. When you look at this situation, it's hard to say that there are positives that come out of things, but usually when there are negative situations, there are generally some positives if you look for them, and it's always important to look.
Yeah, well, from a community standpoint, I think in those initial times, how everybody came together, and I met people from the community that I really didn't know before then, because it brings so many from so many different areas together that was a very positive thing. You look at some of the positive things that have happened, the Logan Boulay organ donating that swept across the country. You look at that. You look at some of the rules that I feel are going to be changed in the training of transport drivers. That's already happening, and it will continue to happen. The seat belts on buses, that's another positive I look at. And I've, as a mayor of a community, I want to try to find those positive things, because after dealing with negative things, I referred to a little bit of humor in things. It helps. It helps the community. It helps the people. It helps those affected and the families, especially, to look for something. And I've seen a lot of the families really grasp on certain of these things and say, "This is what we want to happen after this. This is what we want to see come forward, and some good come out of what has happened."
This has to be important to the parents, especially, Rob. When you look at a tragedy like this, and if you can get some positives out of it, as you say, some changes to bus safety, some changes into licensing, these are things that parents are going to feel strongly about, obviously.
Yeah, and they certainly have taken it to heart, and that's good. That's good, because they're the ones that were affected the most out of this. We can sit back and say as a community we were affected, but the ground zero was the parents and the families, and those at the scene that night, they were affected.
Now, Joe, the last time Rob and I did this, we were in Regina, I think, when we did a session on this before. We talked about a playbook, and as I said, there's no way to plan for something like this, but I think there's a lot to be learned from it, particularly for city managers, for town administrators, mayors, councillors, for all of us. Are you looking at doing something like that and being able to share? I'm glad we're sharing today, but being able to share some of that information with peers?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Bob, we were working with Public Safety Canada, is actually the branch that we're working with on creating an after-action report. And we didn't start till late in the summer, and we worked through the fall a little bit on it. And then when budget time, our municipal budgets and Christmas came along, it kind of got put on the back burner. But we're looking to complete that. And again, we're hoping that there's going to be some good lessons learned in there. Some of what our experiences were with, assembling our EOC, some of our experiences with the media. A lot of it is going to be just kind of what happened, a little bit of just objective of what happened. There were so many other aspects of that weekend compared to what just Rob and I can talk about. I mean, the entire mental health response from our local agency partners, and then albeit a little bit later, the province and their mental health and addiction services and some of their other agencies coming on board. All the interactions at the University Hospital and that sort of thing. There's so much of it that we don't know. how it all played out, but what we do know, we want to be able to document and be able to share it out to everybody, because yeah, there's all kinds of little things that just went right for us that I think if it had gone just a little bit differently, could have ended up with a whole lot less, you know, a result that wouldn't have been near so favorable looking anyways, let's put it that way.
We're going to leave some time for questions at the end of this, but I asked Mayor Rob about the positive stuff, and because, you know, anything that's bad that happens is the city manager's fault. So were there any negatives, you know, when you look back, were there things that you would share today that, you know, it fell off the table and you didn't think it would?
You know, not anything that fell off the table that I didn't think it would. We, as far as underestimating the level of attention that the media would have on this, I think we kind of, I don't know, we underestimated or just weren't prepared to handle it, because we knew it was going to be big. We just weren't prepared how much we'd have to do to handle it. And you know, just as a little bit of a background, in my earlier career, I was a mid-manager in the city of North Battleford when they had their water crisis, and I was I just remember the incident when the city manager at the time said, okay, there's a bunch of media coming, they want to do a scrum, just set them up in council chambers. That was my first exposure to when you have 5, 6 or more different media outlets that all want to show up at one point. They're very demanding, and so I knew that if that's the way it was for 5 or 6 media outlets with 15, 16 or more, it was going to be compounded. So we tried to, I thought that I could, okay, I've been down this road before, I can manage it a little bit. Yeah, I quickly realized that no, we needed way more help. And by Sunday, you know what, I think we had actually overdid it, because we had our own communications manager that was working on it. The Broncos had brought in a communications manager. I had brought in our former communications manager. I had called in the city of Sask. I had accepted the offer from the city of Saskatoon. They brought theirs in, and the province had brought in another guy. Now we had about 5 people all thinking that they were going to tell the media where to go and what they could do and couldn't do. And now we had 5 cooks in that kitchen instead of me that was overwhelmed, we had 5 that were giving mixed messages. So that if there's any one little message I can convey very quickly to everybody is, if you do have a big event like what we did, the first and one of the most important things is to figure out how you're going to wrangle the media, because they're not necessarily, they're not all bad people, Bob.
No, not all of them.
Not all media people are bad, no. But no, they are competitive for the stories, and they're trying to get the best locations and the best interviews, and it can be overwhelming if you don't know how to manage it.
And sometimes they're not worried about your best interest per se.
That's right.
Yes.
All right. I see Glenn. Does that mean we're going to do some questions, or are we?
Are you ready for questions?
Well,
from the floor?
I'd just like to ask Rob, how are we doing time-wise? Are we okay?
you got
We got to be
time,
done
you
at
got
2,
time.
right?
Yeah, but you got time, yeah.
Okay, so 1:30, we've got some time. So, Rob, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, by the way, I guess there's still a city to run. And,
Yes.
and working with your council and how immersed you were in this.
Yes.
That must have been a really difficult
It
stress
was.
when it comes to budgets. And there was some budget stuff going on provincially. During that time period as well. And the one thing I found really impressive was how you managed to juggle all of those chainsaws, especially when Joe started a few of them, and getting through with the business of the city.
Well, and there was a lot of, I guess, rookies on the job, including myself. Like Joe was, 6 months in?
6, 7 months in,
Our
yeah.
communications manager was, 3 weeks on the job?
Yeah.
And myself, and you know, so I remember sitting in Joe's office. I don't know, was it a week after when the provincial budget came down? And we looked at each other. Oh yeah, there's a provincial budget coming down, and we don't know. So I basically phoned up former Mayor Malcolm Eaton and said, Malcolm, can you figure out the budget stuff from the province?
Yeah, can you read that for
me?
me?
And a week later, he had a big report for me, binder on, so we could look through and figure out how it was going to affect our community, because we were totally like with this consumed like 80% of our time, and then the city day-to-day stuff was the other 20% probably. And that's still, to this point, it still goes on. Like we still have.
And by the way, the mayor had a day job?
Yeah, and I have a day job, yeah. So I work 9 to 5, or, you know, so that was always a challenge. My work did give me some time off. I think I took a month off pretty much from my regular job just to get through all what needed to get through, and that's still to this day. I shut my office door at dinner time and do media interviews over my phone with Skype and stuff like that. So, you know, it's still ongoing to a certain extent, and I'm hoping after the first anniversary that things quiet down and that we can get on with running our city. But I want to take the time to thank Joe and our staff that put in lots of extra hours and extra time getting this. We had our budget out the earliest we've had in the history of our community. 2%, I might add. So it was a lot of hard work by everybody to get us through this, and I just marvel at the job that everybody did. You know, keeping the city going and keeping this under control as well.
Right. Going to open it up for questions in just a minute. Joe, anything you'd like to add or to wrap up with?
Yeah, maybe just to wrap up, the mayor just mentioned that, you know, getting past the first year anniversary, we certainly are looking forward to that. We, just to let everybody know, we have started talking with the parents and ministerial group. We are planning you know, some sort of a memorial service on the Saturday, which would be the 1 year past the event. And so we are starting to plan that. There's not a lot of details yet, but really it's I think everybody's looking at that as a turning point, and we're really hoping that you know, most of the things related to the driver will have been wrapped up by then, the driver of the semi. And we're hoping that the families and those that are participating in the memorial service will help the community you know, to move on and help the world understand that Humboldt is no longer mourning. You know, we really, you know, we've gotten past this point, and we're okay, and we're looking to be the progressive city that we've always been, and not to be viewed by everybody as you know, somebody that needs that special attention and special care, because we're doing okay.
And Rob, we've talked about this, that a community is open for business, and
Yeah.
and that attitude needs to be maintained as well, because your business community needs
Yeah.
people to be there to be shopping.
Yeah, and we recently established a marketing committee in the city. We're still putting those pieces together with who's all going to sit on that committee, but the goal is to, again, get the message out that we're open for business, that just in preparation for today, I went on YouTube and I typed in Humboldt, and I had to hit page 10 before I got something about Humboldt other than the Bronco tragedy.
Yeah.
So we have work to do as a community to get the message out that we're doing okay, and we want to get back to the way we were on April 5th. So. All
right. Well, with that, I can always ask more questions, but if anybody has questions from the floor, if you make your way to a microphone, happy to have these gentlemen answer your questions. Start with your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Glenn Alexander, and I'm the Mayor of Waldeck, and I just wanted to thank you guys for coming and speaking today. One of the things that you touched on was the first responders, the families, and the care that they needed for mental health and all of the support services that are there. One thing you haven't touched on, I think it's important for us to maybe put into some context. What have you guys done to make sure that you're okay? I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of burden that was placed on you guys and on those that work with you to deal with this, and there's going to be emotions that come with that and issues that come with that, and I'm wondering if you can speak to what it is that you guys have done or what supports you've availed yourselves to make sure that you're in the best place possible to make sure that you're ready to go forward with the city.
Sure. I'll start, Bob, because yeah, in the days and weeks that followed the accident and the vigil weekend and that sort of thing, there was definitely plenty of support from mental health and addiction services and another division of the Provincial Health Authority. I can't remember what their name is, plus our local partners, Family Services, which are there day in, day out delivering supports to those in need in our community. So in those days and weeks that followed, they insisted, and we certainly took them up on it. They met with our city council. They met individually with a lot of the employees at the city, not just those that were necessarily boots on the ground, but also other employees that weren't necessarily right there through the weekend. So we got all that, and we've certainly encouraged our employees that we've got an employee family assistance program through our benefits provider to make sure that they make use of that. So specific to the city, that's kind of what we've done, but those services, those agencies also have been doing the same thing for other organizations in the city, especially the schools. The schools got lots and lots of attention, not just the ones in Humboldt, but also the ones in the district, in the region. So, and I still meet, there's still a group of us that meet monthly to every 6 weeks or so that were kind of the trauma response people, and they are the mental health and addiction services, the Bronco representatives, the city representatives. So we just kind of sit down and say, okay, how are things going? Has there been any flashpoints? Has there been any kind of incidences that we need to know about and share? And what events are coming up that might trigger responses so that we can get the people there, the mental health people there at those events in anticipation that there might be some responses.
Would your mayor and council be covered by your program?
I don't know if they're, I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a question you should all be asking, because I'm pretty sure in Yorkton we're not.
What was that?
Like, I don't think I would be, like, if it would come to counseling or something, I don't think I'd be covered under the city, because the city has one.
Yep. Yep.
But so often mayors and we're not really considered to be part of the city when it comes to that kind of stuff. You should all check when you get home to find out if counseling was something that would be covered under your programs. I'm not sure that it would be for staff.
Yep.
Yep.
Staff are covered. Whether the political side is, that's a question we should all be asking. Any other questions for our folks today? There you go.
Hi, my name is Velda Dalick. I'm from Lanigan, a small neighboring community to Humboldt. I'd just like to commend you fellas for just the total awesome job that you did in the last year, and coming forth and telling us about it. I wish you Godspeed in your healing. And the rest of you, I'd like to tell you about the art gallery and the museum in Humboldt. They have just thousands of pieces that people from all over Canada and outside of Canada, and I've toured it twice, and you just can't even begin to see it all. So if any of you are in Humboldt ever, do take it in, because it is so worth it. The outpouring of love and support and grief is just profound to see it all. Thank you.
Mayor Bob, just again, Lanigan, certainly one of our main partners that we had to rely on over the weeks or days and weeks that followed was the BHP mine down in Lanigan. They too offered any kind of support that they could for us. One of the things, again, that a lot of people don't think about is custodial service up in the arena and hall. So we were basically going from, a few events through the day that we could keep up with to basically running about 20 hours a day for days straight. And we actually, BHP offered if they could do anything. We said, how about some custodial service? They sent that up to help us out, because our staff had been pretty much, taxed out on what their hours were even before the weekend came. But as importantly, and probably maybe not recognized enough, is of course BHP mine site has a great big temporary housing availability there. And I think that there was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 to 50 mental health workers that were housed and fed compliments of BHP for about 3 weeks down there while they were delivering their service, while the health workers were delivering their services in the schools. So I mean, just the partnerships and the relationships that we relied on was just, you can't even count them all.
Yep, you must have had people in Humboldt that were taking people in as well, because the hotels couldn't hope, to have beds for all of the people that were coming into the city.
Yeah, and not only that, but we did have, just to add to what Joe was saying, we had administrative people, I think from Warman and stuff, that had sent people to help out with our staff at the Uniplex, just, working behind the desk and that type of thing as well. So, that's the support that we have received from other municipalities, and like I say, when you're trying to add this on top of your regular day-to-day operations, it makes a world of difference. I know I mentioned Boston Pizza, but they sent in staff from all their locations in the province to actually to run the restaurant. Well, the local staff had time to, go to funerals and that type of thing as well. So, yeah, we saw that all over. It was just amazing.
It's amazing how people step up. Any further questions? If not, I've always got more questions. It's kind of intrinsic. But Joe, when you look at how you manage this and dealing with all of the processes involved, from the management point of view, something like this is kind of beyond the scope of what we're prepared for, especially the volunteer aspect of it, and the good old Saskatchewan way of you don't ask for help ever. Did you have to get over that in reaching out to people? Again, I agree that is the Saskatchewan perspective, isn't it? Is that you don't ever ask for help. And you know what? It actually came fairly naturally and fairly without too much regret or too much cause for thought when so much help was being offered. And I think it was just that we knew we were in over our heads, let's put it that way. There was no way that we could manage those first few days and weeks on our own. And so when the help was being offered, some of it was very specific, like, oh, hey, can we help you with traffic management, or can we help you with these sorts of things? And some was just open-ended. But yeah, it was, I think, as I said, I trusted the people working around me, and they knew their networks. And so when there was offers of, I think it was Martinsville, one of the neighborhood watch groups were called in to help with some of the traffic and parking control and stuff like that. I don't know who knew whom or how that came about, and it just did, and there was enough people to take care of it and do it that it all worked out. And there's just so many aspects of that, whether it was the audiovisual side and those sorts of things. One of the aspects that I was aware of was when all these phone calls, emails, and texts were coming in, they were coming into to Rob, they were coming into the Bronco organization, they were coming into City Hall. And we quickly realized we've got no central way that we're keeping track or monitoring any of this. We don't even know what people are offering because they're ending up in emails that, aren't getting read. So we called up City of Saskatoon and we said, listen, here's our dilemma. We've got three, actually not three different phones. Rob has 3 different phones that he was getting stuff on. But no, we had a number of different phones that were getting messages brought in on them, a number of different email addresses. What can you do to help us out? They sent out a team of about 4 or 5 people that came and kind of looked at how our networks were set up and that sort of thing and said, okay, let's set up a database, start categorizing stuff. I think they were there for about a week or so, basically helping us just to categorize the offers and messages and that sort of thing, because some of them were just messages of condolence, but others were, please let me know if I can provide cases of water and that sort of thing that were very immediate, and some were more long-term, like when you guys are ready, let us know about a memorial because we'd like to be involved in setting that up. But yeah, that's what it came down to, is that we didn't know if Saskatoon could help us or not, or if one of our other sister cities could, but we picked up the phone and started making the calls, and there was no way that we were going to be able to manage that on our own. So we certainly appreciate the type of help that we asked for. And even as recently as just last week, we again called up the City of Saskatoon and said, coming up on the 1-year anniversary, we know there's going to be media and communication concerns. Can we call upon your media guy to help us out? And the answer has been yes. I don't know if Jeff or anybody else from City of Saskatoon knows that yet, but yeah. Just don't tell Charlie.
Yeah, I don't know if Charlie knows that yet.
Yeah, don't tell Charlie.
And that whole Saskatoon thing started the night of the vigil when Mayor Charlie came, and we had a discussion in the lobby, and he said, Rob, whatever we can do, just give me a call. And we did take them up on it, and they sent 4 or 5 of their key people to Humboldt for a whole week. We set them up in City Hall in one of our meeting rooms, and they basically, I still have it on my phone. I've got all the categories and folders and stuff to keep all my emails all straightened out, and then they went through text messages and tried to sort through that, because I certainly couldn't do it. I had I had no time, even though I wasn't working my regular job at that time, but I mean, it was just overwhelming.
Well, in a situation like that, you can't keep
Yeah.
up. But I know the small city group, we like to pick on Regina and Saskatoon at every opportunity. But I do have to say they've been incredibly gracious. I know in the city of Yorkton with their floods in 2010 and in 2014, the mayor of Regina was the first one I would get calls for. Usually the premier and then the mayor of Regina offering help, any help we needed. And so, I mean, our big cities really do look after us when push comes to shove. So we always want to thank them. So if we have no further questions from the group, I'll turn it back over to our SUMA board representative. Glenn?
Yeah, all I have to say is thanks, Rob. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Bob. To me, we appreciate so much you being here and sharing your experiences. And that saying, Humboldt strong, you prove to us Humboldt is strong. Thank you very much for coming.
Good job, guys. Good job, Rob.
A little bit of housekeeping as you make your way. Thanks again to our sponsor, the Village at Stonebridge. Thank you all for joining us today. And remember, this presentation will be on SUMA's in a couple of weeks. We have an hour now to go to the trade show. Remember, there's trade show in the basement too. So anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.